Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Today, we're going to be hearing about William Ernest Henley. He was born in England. He was a poet, editor, and critic, and he is not very well known in the States. He wrote a poem that I mentioned last week that I'll tell you right up front, I cannot read as impressively as Morgan Freeman. However, I will give it my best shot. The poem Invictus is one of those that is a boomerang to the doldrums that were brought by the Raven and last week's poem by Lovecraft that kind of paint a very dour picture of the universe. Invictus is one of those written by a man who faced these same demons that we talk about when the days become shorter and the nights become colder. And those who don't have any kind of long-term issues with depression suddenly stumble into it with the seasonal brand. William Ernest Henley was a sickly child, and due to a form of tuberculosis in the arthritis, actually, he had to have one of his legs below the knee amputated at a very young age. His father was a bookseller that had a real hard go of it and died when the poet was 12 or 13. He faced some otherworldly pains, as so many of us do as part of life. And as he progressed in his career, he never gave up. In his own lifetime, he met with some significant personal success and became the editor for the Scots Observer, which became the National Observer, and befriended Rudyard Kipling and Robert Louis Stevenson, who is said to have based his character Long John Silver loosely on Henley, which again gives you the idea that Henley not only survived these, he thrived after his tragedies. And it's important that I balance, I think, the more melodramatic pieces with those like this, that when you're at the pit, at the center of your own despair, you have words like this that will lift you out. And for me, one of these poems is Invictus. And the poem goes, out of the night that covers me, black as the pit from pole to pole, I thank whatever gods may be for my unconquerable soul. In the fell clutch of circumstance, I have not winced nor cried aloud. Under the bludgeonings of chance, my head is bloody, but unbowed. Beyond this place of wrath and tears looms but the horror of the shade. And yet the menace of the years finds and shall find me unafraid. It matters not how straight the gate, how charged with punishments the scroll. I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul. It brings goosebumps. It waves over you and then settles, and then the tide comes back again. It's not a long poem. It is not, as we think, powerful. We think symphony sometimes. We think epic most times. But oftentimes, if you look back through the most epic speeches that we have come to adore today from all ages past, they are not very long. Every word is carefully crafted and chosen with a fastidious notion and idea of the point of the piece. Invictus is 4 stanzas long, 4 lines per stanza. And due to that brevity, I'd like to read it again. Invictus by William Ernest Henley. out of the night that covers me, black as the pit from pole to pole. I thank whatever gods may be for my unconquerable soul. In the fell clutch of circumstance, I have not winced nor cried aloud. Under the bludgeonings of chance, my head is bloody, but unbowed. Beyond this place of wrath and tears looms the horror of the shade. And yet the menace of the years finds and shall find me unafraid. It matters not how straight the gate, how charged with punishments the scroll. I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul. We own ourselves. We give so much up to the notion that we have no power, no control over this fickle maiden of fate and her decisions over our life. But the fact of the matter is that's far from the truth. We, in my experience, at the ripe old age of 41, have not figured it all out. But what I do believe and hold in firm conviction is that we have much more control over our life than we allow ourselves to believe. There's no conspiracy involved. Henley obviously had the idea, punishments of the scroll, horror of the shade, pit from pole to pole. It is a very Judeo-Christian idea. However, when he capitalizes words like horror and looms, but the horror of the shade, the fact that he is not specifically so leaves the poem much more, I think, breathing room, faith in the self, where it's reminded of where it came from. But maybe that we need to look more to ourselves for answers than begging and begging and begging for some cosmic conclusion to our unanswerable questions of why. Because sometimes it just is. And Henley faced more than his share of terror early in his years and did not allow that, like Lovecraft did, to mar his view of the world. In fact, he seems to have taken up that mantle, worn it proudly with a smile on his face. William Ernest Henley is one of my heroes for this matter, for this fact, for this poem, for the life that he lived. The fact that we have, again, here this similar theme of nighttime as we had with Poe and as we had with Lovecraft, where you're always alone in your own head as you lay down to go to sleep, whether you have someone beside you or not. And to feel that blackness from pole to pole and be unafraid and thankful to whatever gods may be for my unconquerable soul. The fact that that Henley outright says, again, that there's a soul, that there's a greater power in us, that there is a magnificent amount of life in us that cannot be beat or snatched or torn from us unless we allow it. We have Thoreau, who wrote this same idea when he was jailed for not paying his taxes for a war in which he did not believe. And he wrote Civil Disobedience in the same vein of, you can put me in this jail cell, you can tie me to that bed, but you can't get in here. This is not yours. This is mine. To give that thanks to whatever created this magnificent ball of clay, earth, trees, oceans, people, birds, and love. To thank that one great source for this unconquerable soul, that even as we feel the clutch of circumstance, and there is no pleasantness to clutch, to be in the clutches of something is to be held and tightened. I have not winced nor cried aloud. Under the bludgeonings of chance, my head is bloody, but unbowed. I can take the beatings. You can take the beatings. We can succeed in overcoming this. Bloody, but unbowed. Beyond this place of wrath and tears looms the horror of the shade. That fear that perhaps after this long, arduous life at times that seems to be unforgiving, we again have that oblivion fear that beyond it all, there is no meaning, there is no reason, there is no logic. And perhaps there doesn't need to be. And that's not a sad thing. There's nothing to be bowed and clenching of teeth and wrenching of hair. It is to be brave, chest out, head back, shoulders square, looking at the world unafraid. And yet, the menace of the years finds and shall find me unafraid. It matters not how straight the gate, how charged with punishments the scroll. It doesn't matter how hard it is to fight to get to that thing that you want more than anything in the world, because on the flip side of all of this, not talking about death, but success, that arduous, backbreaking pilgrimage to what you want more than the next breath in this life will not be wasted once you have it in your hands. It doesn't matter how straight the gate, how hard it is to walk, or how charged with punishments the scroll. Maybe the punishments of the scroll is that once you get that thing that you think you want the most of, that it too will come with further trials and tribulations. But you know what you have because you fought hard to get it. And fighting to continue to hold on to it will in many ways seem easier because you do have that logic, you do have that reason, you do have at least a part of that answer to why. And then the two lines that I think are probably referred to the most, that I'm not going to lie and say they are not my favorite. The poem ends with, I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul. They are two of the most beautiful lines in the English language. Nelson Mandela, which is how Morgan Freeman came to read the poem. Nelson Mandela would read this poem, and Morgan Freeman would memorize it in school, but Mandela used the poem for the obvious reasons of all those years in jail. No matter how hard we think we have it, there's always someone who has it much worse. And it's not that we should not feel that pain for ourselves in our own tribulations and circumstance. It's to look at these people that did not bend, that did not bow, that stayed humble, that stayed proud, that sacrificed and came out the other side as master of their fate and captain of their soul. The battle often gives us the right to take charge of our fate. It is the near loss of ourselves that we become more of the captain of our soul, because we know that ocean. We've seen the horror of the shade and faced it down and walked away. I wish that I had more words. I wish that I had more to put into this one, but it is a poem that is very straightforward. It's a poem that in its beauty is very uncomplicated, yet emotionally bottomless, and not a sucking, draining kind of way, but in a fountain of youth, antithesis of hopelessness. And I want to thank Luke Johnson and Noetic for having me back on this week to share Invictus with you. And I will be back next week, hopefully, circumstances allowing, to share more of my love of poetry with you.